A Dorland's wax review and tutorial. That's what we're doing in this video. Have you ever wished that you could protect your watercolor paintings without framing? That's what Dorland's wax is for. I'm going to show you how to use it. We're going to also complete a beautiful bookmark. Welcome back to the channel. If we have not met before, my name is Michelle. On this channel you'll find all things watercolor, as well as drawing, mixed media, even a little bit of business and motivational stuff for artists too. Please do consider subscribing. If you click the bell icon, you get notified every time I have a new video for you. I make at least one free video a week here on YouTube on a Thursday with extra content for Patreon subscribers. So in this video I'll be showing you how to use Dorland's wax. What can you use it for? Well, a few months ago I painted this sign here for my studio, and can you see the problem? I was pretty dumb really, because I forgot about the glass. Well, you can see my reflection, you can see the filming rig, you can probably even see the windows opposite. I mean, I've seen people's cars reflected in it, you know, men walking dogs, all sorts of things. It's been pretty unusable, so I've had to angle my camera around the other way. So during this video, or at least at the end of this video, I'm going to take this out of the frame. I'm going to put the Dorland's wax on it. I won't film that whole process because I'm going to show you how to use it during this video on a much smaller project. But I'm also going to take this out of the frame and put the wax on and put it back up at the end, and we'll see if it looks a bit better, because you really don't want to see the reflection of the street outside my window or my filming rig or me, I am sure. It's just hugely distracting. Even looking at it in my own camera is hugely distracting. So that's one of the things we're going to do. I'm also going to show you how to make a nice bookmark with some foxgloves painted on it. There'll be a full tutorial for the foxgloves as well on this channel later on. I think that's coming up. I'm planning a long way ahead at the moment. I'm filming sort of multiple videos at once with all the stuff I have to film for my Patreon subscribers as well. So you will find that during this video, you know, my clothes, my hair, my nails may change, because I film things when it's most convenient to film them, not necessarily all in one go. But we are going to be making a beautiful foxgloves bookmark today, and I'm going to show you how to use the Dorland's wax to protect it, so that you can perhaps give it as a gift, or that it will just last a little bit longer. The other thing that Dorland's wax can be used for is for making really interesting wax resist effects and leaf imprints. This is just something that I made up by myself. I'm not sure that's the thing they sell it for, but I've been doing that quite successfully. I have a video all about wax resist that shows you how to use the Dorland's wax for that. I'll link to that one at the end of this video, so do make sure you watch to the end, and also to see how this painting turns out. One thing I'm not going to put in this video, but I'm happy to put in a future video if you want it, and that's how to mount the watercolour paper on a wooden block, then use the Dorland's wax so that you can mount it on the wall without a frame. This one here is just going to sit without the glass in. That's not really the ideal way of keeping it, but because it's just a sign I made for the studio, that will be fine. But let me know if you'd like another video on how to mount on a wooden block. In this video tutorial, I'm just going to concentrate on making a nice bookmark. You can also use the Dorland's wax for things like postcards, so you can send them through the post. Obviously you wouldn't use it on your bestest fine art piece that you were putting into some top gallery or top exhibition, but it's a great product. It's completely waterproof. It won't show much when you put it on. It really enhances the look of your work, and if you have things like greetings cards that you just need to add a little bit of protection to, it's going to sort that out for you. So let's get on and start making our bookmark, and then I'll show you how to apply the Dorland's wax in order to protect it. Now, in order to make a small project to test out our Dorland's wax, I thought it would be great fun to make a bookmark. Now, I had some paper left. This is a smaller drawing board than I would normally use, and I was cutting paper to stretch onto big boards, and I had some sort of wide strips down the edge, and I would normally use them for scraps like this one for testing paint colours on. But I thought, while I'm there and I'm stretching paper anyway, I may as well just stretch some paper. So you don't have to stretch paper for this. It depends how much water you're going to put on your bookmark, or you could just use a block of watercolour paint. But it is important that your paper stays flat. I do have paper stretching videos if you need them. So I'm in the middle at the moment of filming for several things, and I'm making this painting here of foxgloves. So it occurred to me that while I had the colours and I was already drawing the shapes, it would be really nice to draw some foxgloves on my bookmark. So first of all, I'm going to actually draw the shape of the bookmark. I want it to have curved corners, so I'm going to do that as well. Years ago, when I was doing more crafts, I used to have one of those punches that would actually punch curved corners, so that's something you can do easily with watercolor painting. When you finish the project, if you want to, you can do that. Now, of course, you know, I could measure all of this properly, but it really doesn't matter as long as it's square. So I'm just going to pick a size, and we'll go like that, and then we'll go across the top here, and I think we'll come across about here. Now, because I don't think I own that punch anymore, I need a way of curving these corners. You can, of course, just grab anything circular and just draw around, but I do have one of these stencils here, so I'm going to curve my corners using this stencil. So first we're going to draw the design onto our bookmark. Don't worry if it goes off the edge a little bit, that'll just make it easier when you come to trim it. Now, I could keep the drawing subject, you know, nicely framed within this bookmark, but I kind of like the idea of it going off the edge. And of course, this is something that you can do with an old watercolor painting. If you've got old work that doesn't really work, you can chop it up and make other things out of it, things like postcards, smaller pictures, or indeed bookmarks like this. But I'm going to draw something specially for this, and I'm looking actually at this little one in the corner here and looking at the shape of that. So what I'm going to do is just sort of bring myself a stem up here, and then I'm just going to start drawing naturally at the top and allow it to go off the edges of the bookmark where I feel like it naturally does that. And I'll just start with this guideline so that everything lines up, and we can begin then, you know, drawing our flowers. And you'll find with a flower like this that you end up with very little of the stem on show. I'm not going to waste too much time in this video on a drawing tutorial, and the reason is that either at the time of filming this there will be already a tutorial on YouTube, or if not, it's going up in the next couple of weeks. I'm filming for multiple videos here, so I'm not quite sure of the published date of that, but there either is already or will be very soon on YouTube a full tutorial for drawing these foxgloves. So don't worry about that if you are not feeling too confident about that. And that video will go more into colour choices as well. So we're going to work quite quickly in this video, and I'm just going to start coming down and putting in all of those flower shapes where I see them. So light to dark is what we need with watercolours. So let's put our yellows in first. I'm going to start putting some paint on this. I've got my nickel titanate and I've got my sap green. I've also got a little palette here in case I need to decant any of this. This paint is still soft because this is a bit like tube paint, and so I'm going to put some into my palette. I'm not going to dwell on this tutorial too long, as I said, because there is one coming up on YouTube. I've just had a look at my filming schedule, and that video will be out 1 week after this. So unless you're watching this video literally the day it comes out, if you are, thank you very much. Unless you're watching it then you will have that foxglove tutorial to look at as well. But meantime, let's just get on with painting this. So I'm going to start by painting the yellow areas. So I'm going to start going in mostly just with the nickel titanium on its own. Because this is a bookmark, I might do a little bit of a background. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to see how well it stands up, or stands out rather, when I finished it. So I'm going to go across these areas here, and then instead of using a shadow colour, in order to keep this fresh, I'm just going to use some green where I need it. I've got some paper towel as well, so I'm just getting any excess water off of my brush when I need to. I can just go in with some green like so, and I'm going to paint the rest of the yellow green flowers. And as I come down here, you'll see that there's a little bit of a yellowish green on some of these, so I'll be popping that into. In fact, let me show you one of those now while I've got this colour paint out. So let's put some, I think we'll put some in here, and of course I'm using that as a vague reference. You know, I'm using the shape of this one really, and sort of bits of the colours of this one, just to make it a bit more interesting. So let's just get a little bit of the yellow green on here, for example. You can pre-wet this flower head first, or what I'm going to do is just take some clean water down to it, because there's going to be some pink on here or some shadow colour as well. So I just want a little hint of that greenish colour up one end, that greenish yellow, just like that. But if you want to, you can do it the other way around by wetting it and then dropping the colour in. So I'm going to continue and do the rest of the buds that are still yellowish green. Now, in order to mould our flower shapes, our florets, we're going to put a little bit of shadow on them. So we're going to put a little bit of shadow colour on now, and here I've got my Davies grey. There isn't too much of it to be seen, but I'm just going to drop a little bit in here and there. For instance, in the inside of these flower heads here, although you can't really see much in the way of shadow, there are white areas. I would like some pure white in here, but also we need to get a little bit of shadow underneath. So in this case, and there's not always a right answer between whether you put shadows on first or afterwards, but I'm going to put a little bit of shadow inside and on some of these up the top here. So what I'm going to do in the case of this one, for example, is to wet this, and I'm going to drop the shadow in just near the top edge there, because I don't want the grey to go across the whole of this inside and make everything look dull later on. But I do just want to get a little bit of shadow in one area. Gone on a little bit heavy, so all I'm going to do is paint that on, and then I'll just rinse and dry my brush, and then just with a damp brush I can manipulate this and lift out or leave on as much as I want, like so. Bear in mind that watercolours dry a little bit lighter as well, so I'm going to do that. I'm also going to put a little bit of shadow in some of the areas that I've already painted up here, which are now dry. So for instance on this one here, I think we'll have the shadow here over on the left hand side. Again, I need to keep it fairly light. It's easy to kill flowers even when you use the correct colours if you go too heavy with the shadows. So I'm going to put any more shadow areas in at this stage that I see. And now it's time to add our pinks. So I'm going to put the pinks on now. I'm going to do them almost in two stages. So we've got this sort of the inside of these flower heads and the outside here. Now there is a hard edge between one and the other. So I'm going to do these in two, sometimes even three stages. I've also been looking at how to do these bits in here. I'm going to put some salt in to get these light patches and then put the darks on top later on. But first of all, we're just going to go in and start putting in the pinks. So some of the flowers heads at the top are mostly white with just a blush of colour. So I'm going to put some clean water on. And I've got two colours in my palette here. So I've got the quinacridone magenta and I've got a little bit of phthalo blue. That's the phthalo blue green shade, but either one will do. This is a bit too pink, this colour, so I'll be mixing a touch of the blue in just to make it a little bit more towards the magenta purple end of the spectrum. And where I've wet that, I'm just going to put a little bit of colour in, bearing in mind that I need the flower behind to show up, so I'll be going around this edge here. And you can see the edge is dry there, and that's going to give us that nice crisp line between them. And the wet to the other side, to this side, will ensure that we get a soft edge here. So I'm going to go down like this. This side here, of course, will show up mainly by the one in front throwing it forward. So I'm going to put a little bit of colour around this part here, actually, because that's against the white background. And I haven't decided yet whether or not I'm going to put a background in this. So that's what one there. And then some of the others further down actually are, you know, fully coloured in pink, so we can just paint the whole of the flower head there. You don't always need to pre-wet. You should only pre-wet when you're getting a soft edge. There's no need to do it as a matter of course. And anywhere I see that there's a little bit more of the blue in there, just take a tiny touch in like that and get some variation in the colour and see how pretty that looks. So we're going to do the middle bits here in three stages. So I have actually decided to use some white paint. I wasn't going to at the beginning of this painting, but I've decided it's necessary. So I'm going to go in here. And what you're doing now is filling in the insides of these trumpets with the first layer of colour. I'm going to go in slightly darker and slightly more purple there. I'm going to clean my brush and continue that round with a bit of clean water. And just dabbing my brush off on some paper towel so that I don't get any puddles and that I don't have my brush too wet, so that we don't get too much in the way of uneven drying lines here. And that's all we're going to do, is paint those middle bits in like that and then just allow them to dry before we put the white on. At this point, as always in the video, if you are enjoying this content, if you're finding it of some value to you, please could I ask you to do me a quick favor and click that like button. It just tells the YouTube algorithm that this is a good video. So if you like, comment, share or subscribe, this video will be pushed out to more people, which helps my channel to grow and means I can teach more people how to paint and draw. I'm so grateful to all of you who watch me on YouTube. So now we're going to add those white and burgundy speckled areas on the inside of the little florets. So what I'm doing next is placing some dabs of white paint in. This is titanium white, which is the more opaque of the sort of watercolor whites. It sometimes is labelled as gouache. I personally think if you're going to use white, you may as well have an opaque one. White paint disturbs really easily. It's important not to agitate it, just to place it on, and we're going to put the dark red on top afterwards. I did consider using masking fluid for this, but I think it would have been too hard edged. I also thought about using salt, but it really wasn't working out, so I'm just going to use some dabs of white paint here. So the white paint is dry and I've got some Perylene Violet, but you could use something like alizarin Crimson if you don't have this colour. I'm going to pop in like so. And I'm allowing the paint to sit in the centre of some of those little white areas so it forms an outline, using minimal amounts of water here. You can do this with pan paints, just be careful not to use too much water. We don't want to agitate or disturb the white paint at all, because it will just end up making sort of a mucky pink colour if we allow that to happen. So just place on and try not to agitate too much. I'm going to place the dark in all of these little shapes. Lastly, every plant needs a few greens. So I've got my sap green here. I've mixed in a little bit of the yellow and plenty of water because I want this to be for the lightest areas of the green. And what I'm going to do is just go in here and pop those in where I see them. Also going to use this colour for these very pale sort of stamens that extend as well. I think we've only got one in this picture. And also for any of the areas up the top here that I see as being a little bit lighter. So I've put some more sap green out here. I've also got my phthalo blue green shade here. Any phthalo blue will do for this. I had some pink in it, so I cleaned that out. You never want to get your pink in with your green. As we have spoken about previously on this channel, it will dull your green down. So what I'm going to do now is get these other areas of green, and I'm just dropping the sap green straight on the paper there. Put quite a bit of water on it. Sometimes it's more important that the paper glows through. If you want something to be bright, more paint is not always the answer. You can see where we've gone dark here. Sure, we've got some real strong dramatic darks, but we lose the brightness. And that's something that always happens if you go very strong with watercolours, because you're stopping the paper from glowing through. So I want it to be a little bit brighter here for the greens. So I've got this sap green. Where I want a little bit of dark or a little bit of shadow, I can drop a tiny bit of the phthalo in. You'll see I didn't add any water to this. If it looks a bit dark, with a clean damp brush, I can just sweep it out a little bit like so. This one here is touching it, so I'll wait till that first one dries before I put the second one in. I'm going to go in now and fill in the remaining greens. So the final thing I'm going to do here is just mix a little bit more of this sap green and add a tiny bit of the phthalo in. I'm also adding in a bit of this yellow. The reason is that the yellow is opaque, whereas the other two colours are more transparent. And I want the stem to have a real feeling of sort of solidity to it. So I'm going to go in now with this thicker, more opaque colour and take it up here and anywhere else that I can see the stem. I can also get the tip of my brush and just pick up a little bit of blue, keeping my brush quite dry, and just take a bit of shadow down one side. I can also clean and dry my brush if I want to. Just take a little bit of a highlight out of the centre of that stem. By having stems darker either over one side or both sides, what you do is you make them look more circular. So I'm going to paint any of the stem that I can see within this flower. So let's look now at the background. So seeing the finished picture like this, I think that I want a background in this. I've also got one or two smudges up here from where I've been erasing, and I didn't wait long enough for it to dry. So I'm going to place a background in. I fancy having quite a flat opaque background, so I don't have any gouache to hand, so what I'm going to do is just use some leftover white and pop some of the blue in it. Now the blue has still got a tiny touch of green in, which should mean that we'll get kind of a turquoisey colour. So let's just try dropping that in and mixing it up with the white there. What I'm going to do is mix and mix this until everything is mixed together and I've got the shade that I want. I'm not going to go too dark with it. I'm going to make sure that I've got enough to get across the background, and an opaque gouache colour like this runs out much more quickly than a watercolour. So if you're going to do this, do make sure you've got plenty mixed up. So I've got my colour mixed up here. I did actually grab an old acrylic brush, so I had a stiff brush like this to mix with. You don't want to be scrubbing a dried paint with a nice watercolour brush. All I'm going to do now is apply it over the background. It's actually much easier to do a flat wash in a gouache or a slightly opaque colour than it is to do it in watercolour. So I'm just going to paint around the things in the foreground. You can swap to a smaller brush if you need to. So the painting's done and dry. What I'm going to do now, rather than wax it before I take it off the board, I'm going to take it off the board first and wax it, because I want to actually wax both sides because it's going to be a bookmark for use. I don't want it to be unprotected on the other side as well. So I'm going to cut first. So I've got a metal ruler and I've got a scalpel blade. What I've done is I've drawn some curves around here, but I'm going to go along the straight edges first and then I'll cut around the curves with a pair of scissors. Now it is possible, if you are a crafter, you may have one of those punches that does curved corners, so you may be able to use that. I'm just going to cut round like so first of all. So I've gone all the way around with the knife. Now you don't have to use a craft knife like this if you don't have one. Also, if you don't have a metal ruler, I wouldn't suggest you do this. What I would do is take the paper off the board and cut with scissors. Another option is a guillotine. If you've got a guillotine, then it will actually go through a single layer of watercolour paper. Again, remove from the board and then you can use that. So I'm just going to remove this paper from the board now so that I can kind of press this out. This knife is rather blunt because I often use them for scraping at mosaics, so I fear I may not have gone through the paper particularly cleanly. So I'm going to lift this stretched paper off the board now, and then I can just see if I've gone through properly, and if not, I can just go in by hand and just go over those bits there. Do be careful with a scalpel blade like this. Not only can they cut you, but it's very easy to go offline with them actually and cut into what you've done. So if you're not used to using one, do just use scissors for this part. All I'm going to do next with my paper scissors is just curve those ends off. I can still, you probably can't see them on the video, but I can actually still see the little pencil lines that I drew on there. So this is the bit you've been waiting for, where we apply our wax. So I've got my Dorland's wax here. Comes in this very, very large tub, and take the lid off and it's just like this. It doesn't seem to, you know, it's not like coconut oil. It doesn't seem to go liquid in high temperatures, although, you know, if you're living in India or somewhere, don't quote me on that. But we've had some pretty high temperatures here in the UK recently, and it's stayed fine. I've also got a cloth here, so this is just a piece of old t-shirt. I often cut up old t-shirts and use them as rags, and this is ideal for applying this. And you can see that I am leaning here on some magazine paper. I don't suggest you lean on newspaper because the print can come off and ruin your piece of work, unless you have access to something called newsprint, which is the paper that they use before they print on it for newspapers, and that's something that's often available in art supply stores. Printmakers use it a lot, so if you've got newsprint you can use that, or magazine paper is fine, or anything at all that's not going to mark your work. So I'm going to do the back first, and I'm just getting a fair amount because it will spread, and then I'm just going to apply in circles like this, and we're going to work down. Okay, unusually I'm getting a little bit of lint coming off of this, so I'm going to swap to a lighter and a different piece of cloth. Now if you want to make sure that you don't get any lint come off at all, then you can of course use one of those microfiber cloths that you can buy for cleaning. That would do the job too, but I would anything that you buy like that, I would wash before you use it. I'm going to turn this over now, and then I'm going to do the other side. So here again, we're going to take this and we're going to do circles. Now, one thing I have found is that pink does tend to lift a little bit, and that's with anything. I mean, any pink or red pigment is terrible for bleeding and lifting no matter what you're doing. So I'm going to be rather careful here. So I'm going to start up the top, and you can see where I'm applying that wax very carefully, and you can see that it doesn't smudge anything, but it is giving it a protective coat. Once this is finished and dry, you would actually be able to, obviously you can't immerse it in water, but you know, if you spilt a drop of water on it, it would just roll off. So we're going to go around here. As I said, I'm being very careful when I come to these darker, pinker areas, and I'm not pressing too hard, and you can see that everything is absolutely fine. If you want to see where you've been with this, you can hold it up in the light and just sort of tip your head, and often you can just see which part you have done, which part you have not. Now, I haven't seen any particular drying time given for this product on the jar, but I have found myself that it does take a few minutes just to stop being quite as tacky. So once I've applied this, I will actually put this aside for a few minutes and allow it to dry. I'm also going to take this cloth around the outside so that I fully seal this little bookmark as well. So one last thing I'm going to do to finish my bookmark is put a little bit of ribbon on it, and I actually want mine at the top and not at the bottom, because I like the ribbon to sort of come at the top of the book when it's not in use. So I've put a tiny dot in the centre. You probably can't see it, but it's just to help me line up, and I've got a single hole punch, so I'm going to punch this like so. Now you can actually use, if you're close to the edge like this, you can use one of those double hole punches just by tipping the corner of it if you're careful. I'm going to cut a length of ribbon. I just happen to have this one in my sewing room and I thought it looked nice. I'm not sure it's an exact match of colours, but I'm going to go for it anyway. Just going to fold it and push it through. And then we'll do a knot at the top. And then all I'm going to do is cut the ends in a nice angle, and that will stop them from fraying and also make it look pretty. There's our finished bookmark, and it's nicely protected from the elements. So I promised I'd bring you back at the end of the video when I'd taken the glass out of the frame, and here we are. So what I did was I removed the glass. Excuse me if I'm not speaking very well, I've just had one of those invisible braces fitted on my teeth, and I've got a bit of a lisp now, so I'm struggling to get used to it, but I'm sure it will be fine. I've only got to wear it for 28 weeks, so no problem there at all, and it's fabulously comfortable. So I took the glass out of the frame. I had to remove the tape from the back and remove the pins. If you want to know how to take apart a painting that's been properly framed and put it back together, mount it correctly, mat it correctly if you're American, all of those things, those are available on my Patreon channel. And I believe I also did a step-by-step of actually painting the lettering and how I did that as well. So if you want that stuff, that's over on Patreon. Link is in the video description. So I took the glass off, I took the painting out, I took the mat off, and I rubbed the Dorland's wax all over. It was a little bit hard to see where I was going with it because it's so kind of matte, you can't see where it is. So what I did was I sort of did it panel by panel. So in other words, I did sort of the blue bit and then I did the zebra bit, and I just sort of went on like that and did the letters separately. I did find only with the pink that the paint lifted slightly, not enough to cause any damage to the painting, but just to put a little bit on the cloth. Now that could have transferred onto the white letters if I wasn't careful, so that was something I had to watch for. Now I find this all the time. Reds are notorious for lifting, so anything that's got red in, orange, purple, all of those things, they lift really easily. So just be careful if you are using the Dorland's wax and you've got like a bright red, just be careful just to work in small areas and sort of just have a look at the cloth and move it around. As I said, it wasn't enough to do any damage to the painting, but it was enough just to deposit a bit of that pink onto the cloth, which potentially could have been deposited elsewhere if I wasn't careful. But overall, I'm fabulously happy with that. I don't know if you remember at the beginning of the video, it had all sorts of reflections on. You could see everything in it, you know, cars, people walking their dogs, all of my filming lights and all of my filming rigs. So it's worked really well. One thing I did find was that the glass, you know, it did go somewhere to supporting the painting because it's a large painting, so it was a little bit difficult. I had to put a little bit more tape on it to keep it still. But overall, a fantastic result there. So really happy with that. So do let me know in the comments if you've tried Dorland's wax. Are you going to give it a go now? I will try and leave some links for the products in the video description, but bear in mind that it can be a little bit difficult to obtain if you're not in America. I actually had to get it imported, Certain UK suppliers do stock it, but they were all out of stock when I went looking for it. But it certainly is worth buying, even if you have to pay a little bit more for it, because you get such a huge tub. It's well worth the money. Before you leave this video, don't forget to check out that video description, because there are some free PDFs you can download there for no money whatsoever. You can also find out about all of my online courses if you need a little bit more help with your painting and drawing. Now, during this video, I mentioned that I had a whole video about wax resist techniques. There's a fantastic Dorland's wax technique in there, but there are also lots of others using things like candle wax and oil pastels. You can watch that video right now.